29. So, wow, I've shown you 4 visuals to be used in reviving Jesus. I've shared with you 4 levels of the gospel in reviving Jesus. If you're still discussing what must I do to be saved, you're still preaching and teaching good news. You haven't even approached the best news or the better news or the best of the best news. Now, I was on my way someplace. I lost my spot. I did John 2:19. I should have made a note of where I was. I've been to Matthew 11. So I guess that where I'm going to have to go is to church. That's a good place to go to find Jesus. Since he is the church. And we find the church in Colossians chapter 1, verses 15 to 18. Let's go to church. Not at 10th and Vine, not out at John Young Parkway, not on the Alameda, not at Times Square, but let's go to church in the mind of God. Colossians chapter 1, verses 15 through 18. Let's go to church. I'm going to put this down because after I go to church, in Colossians, I'm going to church in Ephesians 3. Colossians chapter 1, verses 15 through 18. That's where you'll find the church. Because that's where you'll find Christ. I'm almost there. Talking about Jesus. I have to go to 12. When you go to Colossians chapter 12, you go to the mind of God, because he's doing the talking about his plans and he's the only one that knows. And the Apostle Paul is telling us how to pray. Giving thanks unto the Father, which has made us fit meet to partake of the inheritance of the saints in light. who has delivered us from the power of darkness and has translated us into the kingdom of his dear Son, in whom we have redemption, in whom we have been set free from the penalty, power, and consequences of sin, death, hell, and the grave. Through his blood, even the forgiveness of sin. That's what Jesus, that's what the church does for you. Why? Jesus, the church, who is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of every creature. For by him were all things created. There we go, the Yahweh, the God Most High, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who is creator, who is Jesus. For 16, for by him were all things created that are in heaven and that are in earth, visible and invisible, whether they be thrones or dominions or principalities or power, all things were created by him and for him. And some people have the nerve to want to serve a witch. But it's their God-given right to do it because their blood is on their own head. And if I have time in this episode, I'll tell you what it means. But if you want to find out what your blood is on your own head mean, read Genesis chapter 2, verses 16 and 17. It has not changed. The substance has changed, but the principle is still there. And he is before all things, and by him all things it consists. He says, I am not who they say and think that I am. And in Colossians chapter 1, God through his Spirit and the apostles is telling us who he is, what he has done, and basically why we need to put our faith, our trust, in obedience and dependency on God in Jesus. Now, 1:18. And he is the head of the body, the church. And he is the head of the body, the church, who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead. Yes. Membership in the church began on Pentecost. It became possible on Pentecost by grace through faith. But the church was established by the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. Read it in verse 18. And he is the head of the body, the church, who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in all things he might have the preeminence. We're talking about reviving Jesus. Because for the past 500 years, or I'll just say nearly 500 years, I want to say 1,800 years, for the past 1,800 years, and I would be on solid, sound biblical ground if I said for the past 1,800 years, the church has struggled with the identity of Jesus, and they're still struggling today.